Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Yesterday, in a move that took everyone completely by surprise, the well-known columnist, author and chairman of Amnesty International was stopped at Bangalore airport and not allowed to go abroad. He was told he's on the exit control list. Joining me now to describe precisely what happened and to answer the question, could this be revenge by the Modi government for his stringent criticism of the Prime Minister's performance, is Aakar Patel himself. Aakar Patel, can you start by describing for the audience exactly what happened at Bangalore airport yesterday?
Certainly. I checked my bags in and I went to immigration where the officer was taking longer than they normally would with my passport. Then he wrote something down on a slip of paper and came out of his cubicle and went to his superior. None of them spoke to me. When I asked them if I was on some sort of list that stopped me from leaving, they said yes. At that point, I showed them a court order which I had secured from a Surat court where my passport had been impounded for a case that a BJP MLA had filed against me. This was in 2020. And as one of the conditions for bail there, I had to surrender my passport, which I did. After I got a series of invitations from universities in the US to speak, I moved that court in Surat and asked if I could get my passport back, which I did. The government there, the BJP government, opposed the release of my passport. So they knew I was leaving. The court overruled them. Having secured my passport and got a visa and tickets, which are very expensive now that COVID restrictions have been lifted and there are a lot of people flying, I went to the airport, assuming that I would be allowed to go through. At that point, I was told that there was another notice for me. The term officially is LOC, a lookout circular, that had been sent out by the CBI. And that was the basis on which I was stopped. I tried to say that this was something I had no knowledge of. I spoke to the CBI officer I had been in touch with, who said, well, we put you on the list and I didn't tell you. And I said, aren't you supposed to tell me? And he said, well, we thought that we shouldn't tell you. And that was it. I left the airport and came back home.
The CBI officer admitted that they put you on a list but deliberately chosen not to tell you. Is it in fact a violation of the rules not to tell you?
So I'm told. I think in court today, that is what my lawyer brought up. The CBI pretended to not know that they were required to tell me. Certain other things also came out that we can speak about. But certainly I thought it was not fair that I was not told and given no opportunity to challenge in court something as serious as this.
Am I right in saying that by not telling you, the intention is to harass you? It is to allow you to go to the airport in the belief you can leave the country and then stop you. Thereby, you will have incurred the cost of a ticket, which may not be refundable. You will also be inconvenienced. And most importantly of all, you would not have had the opportunity to challenge the whole issue. So is this designed to harass?
Absolutely. I would put it in exactly the words that you did.
Now, all of this, if I understood both what you said just now and the newspaper reports correctly, is in connection with the second case. According to the newspaper reports, a case was brought against you and Amnesty International and your chairman of Amnesty International pertaining to something like 36 crore worth of funding. Were you aware of this second case, or did you only find out about it at the airport?
Not even at the airport. I had no knowledge of what the LOC was on the basis of. It is only now when I've taken them to court that the CBI is saying that this is the case. What happened is on the same set of transactions, and Amnesty has been functioning in India since the 70s. George Fernandez was the one who brought it here first. But episodically, it has been here off and on for about 5 times. This last 5th time, it began in 2013, 2 years before I joined. And on the same set of transactions, in 2018, we had a raid by the ED. In 2019, we had a raid by the CBI. And in 2020, we had another freeze by the PD. All 3 on the same set of transactions, on which each time that I was called to whether the ED or the CBI, I went. Whatever was asked for of me in terms of documentation or statements, I gave. I went alone. I told them that I accepted responsibility for all the things that had occurred there as the CEO. Not just that. In 2019, at the end of November, my term as CEO there ended. I returned to Amnesty. Not only have I no intention of leaving the country, I want to stay with Amnesty and fight this. And that's why my designation changed to chair, which is what I am at the moment.
So if I understand what you said correctly, they keep dragging on a case and adding new attributes to it and bringing new agencies in to investigate. And once again, to a layman like me, it sounds as if the intention is to harass, to prolong the process, and to expand the pain and suffering. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
It is. I think it's factually accurate. And I think that anybody in the democratic world reading the sort of allegations that they've leveled against us and the sort of organization it has been over the last 60 years would find it hard to believe that these are true. This is not the sort of thing we do. We are not money launderers. That is the accusation that's been made against us.
They are actually saying that Amnesty International, arguably the world's most renowned fighter and defender of human rights and individual liberties, is money laundering in India. You're serious? Yes, when that is what you say is the charge you and Amnesty face?
It's PMLA. It's the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. That is what they've leveled against us.
Tell me, you are in court today. Your case was heard in the morning. You're hoping that you will get a ruling by this afternoon or evening. How did the case go?
It went very well, I thought. My lawyer, Tanveer Mir, was outstanding. And I think that the CBI had not even a fig leaf. I think that they had absolutely nothing. And the judge, I think, asked the right questions of them. And I'm really confident that I'll get an order in my favor. But it's not only the right to leave the country that I'm asking for.
What else are you asking for?
I'm asking that the CBI officer who sent the LOC be penalized and be made to repay me for the cost that I have incurred for my ticket, which is about 3.8 lakh rupees from his salary.
In other words, you believe he's acted vengefully, you believe that he's acted beyond his remit and beyond what the law permits, and therefore he should be punished, and this money, 3.8 lakhs, should be taken from his salary, not paid by the state on his behalf.
No, and I don't know what his motives were, but I can only presume that he was doing what he was told, that the malice doesn't come from the bureaucrat you're dealing with, but the political powers that govern his office. But I can only do this to make sure that other officers don't do the same thing. They should show some spine and say no when they're asked to do something that's not legal and not proper.
In other words, you're setting a precedent by demanding action be taken personally and individually against the officer concerned. You want to ensure others are never tempted to behave the same way.
Yes, and I think the reason why most of us don't do this sort of thing is that we fear the malice that will come after that demand is made. I don't. I think that we should push to make sure that the rule of law is upheld, not just for our cases, but for all cases in future.
Now, at the start of this interview, you informed me that, in fact, the CBI officer had admitted that he had deliberately chosen not to tell you that you were on the LOC or the exit control list. The rules probably require him to do so, but he opted not to do so. Is that something that you believe the judge was sympathetic to when that argument was put to him today?
I couldn't hear the audio too well, but it appeared to me that that was the case, that they should have followed certain processes, which they didn't. And the broad argument is, generally speaking, as is always the case with the CBI or the ED, for those of us who've dealt with it, is that due process is not followed. We had a freeze, just to give you one of many examples, we had a freeze on our accounts in October of 2019, an absolute freeze. We could not access any of our accounts as we can't at the moment. But we moved High Court and we got instant relief based on the fact that the ED had not followed even basic process. So they've got sweeping powers with no responsibility, and they are never held to account for the wrongs that they do. And we need to change that.
And here was a judge, and maybe you're lucky you had a judge of this sort today, who understands that processes are very important, because if processes are not followed strictly, then the outcome is illegal. And that is a very good grounds for saying that what happened to you yesterday was wrong. and you should be given permission to travel whenever you want, and perhaps also grounds for punishing the official and saying, you will pay for this from your salary because knowingly you defied the law of the land, or at least the rules that apply to the law of the land.
I'm hoping that he sees it that way. I'm not just asking for relief. And I think that this is part of the fight for human rights, that it cannot be left to the state and its officers to act with such impunity and believe that they will get away with it. I'm sure that he did not expect me to tell the court that I want my money back, but I do, and I want it from him.
And you're confident that you will have a ruling from the judge today itself?
I am confident I'll have a ruling from the judge because he's set orders for this evening. I don't know whether the ruling will be in my favor. I hope it is. I don't know whether the ruling will include something about the officer paying me back, but I hope there is.
Let's briefly widen our discussion. You're an outspoken critic of the Modi government. Your recent book, The Price of the Modi Years, is a comprehensive account of the cost India is paying and continues to pay for Narendra Modi's prime ministership. Do you suspect that this is some sort of revenge, that you are being deliberately targeted because you are an outspoken critic and because you have put together a mass of detail and fact that is probably very difficult for the government to refute?
I learned something today that I didn't know, that the LOC had been issued on the 31st of December 2021, which is 6 weeks after my book was published, on the 14th of November 2021. The CBI raid was in November 2019. The last time I spoke to the CBI officer was in 2020. I've had no contact with them since. There was no reason for them to pick something out a year later, more than a year later, and put me on that LOC. And I can only surmise that this was because of malice.
It's a pretty convincing surmising that you're doing, because there's a whole year's gap between your last conversation in November 2020 and the LOC being applied in December 2021. And there's a 2-year gap since the CBI raid of 2019 and December 2021 that clearly suggests that the 6 weeks interval is the more important one. And that's the 6-week gap between your book coming out, which hits the Modi regime hard, and this action being taken. Tell me.
Just back to that, sorry, the CBI refused to tell the judge who in the CBI asked for the LOC to be posted. They said this was a collective decision, quote unquote. And the reason was that I was a very powerful person and had access. It seemed to me that they were avoiding naming the person who asked them to post the LOC.
When you say avoiding naming the person, they were protecting the person's name because the person may be an important politician or minister, and they didn't want to reveal it because that would embarrass the person concerned. I presume that is what you're suggesting, or what was the intention of the CBI officer.
I am.
Tell me, just a few days before you were stopped, Rana Ayub was also stopped, except in her case it happened in Mumbai, I apologize, not in Bangalore. Is this becoming a way of punishing people the government doesn't like?
I think that harassing activists, journalists is something that they do regularly. And they think of ways that they can torture us, new ways all the time. And I have no doubt in my mind that Ayub was stopped purely because of her activism and her writing against the government. There is no, to my mind, it is impossible that the case against her that's been made out by the ED was the reason why she was stopped from leaving. It is the malice of the government, and it's a signal to activists and journalists and politicians as well. We have to accept that shut up, don't talk about certain things. Don't bring up the things that we are doing to our own country, to our own countrymen and women, and you'll be fine. But if you speak about these things, we will come after you.
Let me then ask you the context that these are signals being given to journalists, sometimes even to politicians. Don't talk about certain things. Don't try and expose certain things about us. Otherwise, we'll come after you. What do you then make of the way journalists are treated, both by the Modi government and the center, but increasingly also by BJP governments in the states, and particularly, Yogi Adityanath and the UP government? 4 or 5 years ago, we were called prostitutes. Now, the Unlawful Activities Act and sedition is hurled at us, even when it is utterly indefensibly being used. We seem to have become enemies of the state in their eyes.
Only some of us. We should accept that for the majority of the press in India, which is owned by corporate interests, they surrendered a long time ago. There is no real free press in India in the sense that though it has the freedom to operate, it doesn't say the sort of things that a free press ought to. You could not pick up a morning newspaper today, or you could not turn on a TV station at night and listen to things that actually make sense. This country is eating itself through a rabid communal instinct that is being directly injected by the BJP, and there is almost no resistance to it in the media. So while they do go after some people in the media, it's normally the ones that are outspoken. And we should also accept this, that the outspoken voices have become marginalized in mainstream media, that they no longer have the TV shows that they did and the columns that they did. And this is a fact, and I think that this will not change.
Tell me, we're coming to the end of this interview, but I want to ask you about Amnesty. I described it earlier as perhaps the most prestigious NGO defending human rights and individual liberties. How badly is it being attacked and targeted by the government, and how does it function today?
We function through volunteers because human rights work doesn't require money. I write for a living, so I don't really need to have a full-time job with them. So it's difficult that we have to respond to cases in Chennai for the FEMA allegations, in Delhi for PMLA, as I told you, money laundering, with the CBI, several courts, Delhi High Court, Karnataka High Court, the Supreme Court, which we are moving and should be heard in, I think, sometime next week. We have not been treated fairly. I'll give you an example. I have a court order which gives me relief for one of my bank accounts, which has the wrong bank account number. And that order has not been corrected. It's been over a year and a half. I've got the sorry, you were saying.
I was just simply going to say, a court order giving you relief for bank account, but actually perhaps deliberately writing the bank account number wrong, thus making it infructuous. This is another form of harassment.
I don't know whether the mistake was deliberate, but a refusal to correct seems to me to be quite unusual. I've got an affidavit from the government saying that they have no objection to my operating certain other accounts, but I can't operate them because the bank will not let me. And the banks are terrified because the ED summons them and tells them not to let me actually operate. This is the way the state runs in India. This is our rule of law.
So in the world's largest democracy, where every day ministers and prime ministers are proud of our rights and our liberties, Amnesty is being daily harassed and not allowed to function. That is the paradox at the center of the claim that we are the world's biggest democracy.
Absolutely. And I think that the external world has seen it. The reason why we are only partly free, which we are only partly free, we should accept that outside of the electoral democratic process, the normal freedoms that are available to citizens in democracies are not actually available to us. And I don't think that is anything hidden from anybody here, but to experience it firsthand as an institution respected around the world and damaged because of the work that it does has been quite insightful and revealing for me.
Aakar Patel, I wish you luck as you await the order this evening. If, and I hope that is the case, it's in your favor, how will you celebrate? And secondly, how quickly will you then leave the country before they change their mind again?
Pop a bottle of champagne firstly with my wife. That's the first thing I'll do. I don't know how soon I'll leave. Tickets are very expensive. And my schedule has been thrown out of whack. So, but very soon, I think as soon as tomorrow, and then hope when I'm in the queue for immigration that this government respects the rule of law this time. But once again, I won't be surprised if I'm stopped once more, though I hope that that's not the case this time.
Aakar Patel, I wish you luck. As you said, fingers crossed. Enjoy the champagne and enjoy your time in America. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Thapar.